We're delayed a little bit. We're waiting for the YouTube thing to come on. We want to make sure that everything is publicized, everything is recorded. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 5:34 p.m. on September 6th, 2022. I imagine there are plenty of, well, first of all, I want to establish a quorum. All of our council members are present and
If you'll pray with me. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us gather here together. There's so many things for us as a community, as a county, to be grateful for. We just come to you today. We ask you to be with us during this meeting. Give the leaders of this community. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now I'm just waiting to get the sign-up sheet. I know that some people have signed up to speak, so...
Up to speak to council in front of the audience, just to refresh everybody's memory as to the guidelines for what people's opportunity is here, right, and how and whether or not we can engage them with what they have to say. Yes, it's supposed to be a maximum of 15 minutes, right? So what we have here, and it's to be divided amongst the people that are here, and it looks like we got 8 people, so we're going to give each one of them 2 minutes. And the first one is Carl Munch. If you would please come up, and I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. I always mess up your name.
I respond to a wide variety of mispronunciations.
And if I can interject for just one moment, Carl, just as a reminder, just to keep things on track, we've got an immense amount of information really to plow through this evening. Council, however, cannot engage in a dialogue about these items. Even if it's on the agenda, it's meant for you to be able to voice your opinion, to make sure that we get a hold of that information, can take it into account, but we can't actually engage in dialogue at this point in the meeting. Thank you, David. And please, when you come up here, state your name and your address.
My name is Carl Minch, 540 Galahad Loop. There's raw sewage on the ground where it can run off during rains into the lakes, seep into the groundwater. Does anybody really honestly support that? If you are against the ordinances currently under discussion, then you do support that. Because otherwise, the city has no way to stop it. I see people on Facebook talking about the less restrictive days before the city, and I hear it in conversation. Do not specifically prohibit living in a trailer. The exact phrase used in nearly every section is, nor any tent, house trailer, or mobile trailer shall be erected, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot in the subdivision, nor shall any structure of a temporary character be used at any time as a residence. I apologize to council for only having one copy of this. I've highlighted this. That's okay. 3 and 4 that say all camping vehicles, buildings, and other structures must display at all times the Ivanhoe Medallion of Approval. To translate that, it effectively means that the camper vehicle, building, or structure must be permitted and stickered. In those restrictions, there is also a demand they be kept in, quote, good repair, and that the camper, mobile home, or other structures in default, and it goes on to say that the owner or occupant...
Carl, time. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank you, Marion. I started my timer a little late. Okay, next is Bob Stoneman. Bob? And I'm going to start the timer after you've given your name and address.
Name is Bob Stoneman, 249 Engamore Drive. Mention is on the, there was a phrase, something to do with the years of occupancy or the age of the trailers. I think a lot of the restrictions and using an arbitrary number like that could have been 9, could have been 12, could have been something other than that. I think that's a fact. It is happening. I think, though, that rather than that be a overall ordinance inclusion, it should be a separate item under health and safety. Now, this is a city. I know we don't have a health inspector. We don't have anybody to do that kind of review. The money to do that would be, I think, quite a bit to hire somebody. I think that's up to the owner to do that. How we inspect or take care of that, I think that's up to the council to come up with a specific guideline on how to do that. If they need someone to do that, we do use volunteers for a lot of things. That would be easy to inspect the terms of the property. It's something that the city should give at least enough leniency to take a look at these issues to see if they can be remedied. As far as removing a trailer, I don't know. There's a lot of people that have trailers here that are over 10 years old. I don't think they have $70,000 for residence and not have it so cut and dried. Legally, that document is correct.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Lloyd Omsberg. I don't know how to stop this. Okay.
I'm Lloyd Omsberg. I live on 563 Sherwood Forest Drive. I haven't been in town. First thing I want you to know is I voted for every one of you guys. No, I did. I voted for every one of you more than once. So it's not that, but I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to say today. Okay? This thing with the stickers, and I know it was alluded to here, I don't know if that's legal. You know, when the truckers went, it actually is, you're trying to track people coming into the town, and that's just not something that seems right to me. Now, because I only have 2 minutes, I'm going to have to, I just don't believe it's the city's has any business knowing who my visitors are going to be. And I don't think they should have to come in and check in with you to come here. Okay, the other thing that I have here is, and if you have an ordinance that can't be enforced, maybe it should be deleted instead of trying to make it harder on the people in town. You know, you don't have to have all these ordinances that you have. And then I heard this statement, and I just want you to know that anytime I hear the words, it's for your health, your safety, your welfare,
Time.
that's a...
Next is Sarah Warren.
Sarah Warren, 652 Charmaine Drive East. First and foremost, council, thank you for your service to this community. I'm going to ask these things of council. Be thoughtful in your decisions. Ivanhoe was originally designed to be a recreational camping community, a place for property owners to escape the busy day-to-day life and enjoy our beautiful natural surroundings. We have evolved into a diverse community full of set existence as long as standards are met, standards that support the health and beauty of our environment. To annihilate camping, tiny houses, and recreational vehicles could have an alarming impact on our community and the small businesses that depend on the revenue brought in from our very important weekenders. Vinnie's, the Hitchin' Post, Longhorn Liquor, Dollar General, just to name a few. Important tax dollars could be lost. The IPOA could be affected as people choose a more peaceful and relaxing place for lakes. Without this revenue, our volunteers will be disabled to further improve those areas of enjoyment. I talk to many people as I volunteer for the association. Every single person I have spoke with loves the beauty, privacy, and diversity that Ivanhoe has to offer. We are a very special community. Distinctive in our design, let's embrace our uniqueness and rise above these. Back to basics, focus on security, roads, dams, and areas of Ivanhoe that need addressing, whether it's an abandoned site, a junked-up yard, or a neighbor in need. We must, as good citizens, remember where we came from and strive not only to maintain, but improve every day on the blessings bestowed upon us as citizens of this very special and unique community.
Thank you, Sarah. Next is Joe McIntyre.
Joe McIntyre. I live at 186 Ivanhoe Ranchettes Drive. As the only person in the city of Ivanhoe and actually in the county of Tyler who was given a license by the state of Texas to manage code enforcement, I can tell you that what these people in front of you are doing is absolutely amazing. There are so many people in this great community who ignore and fail to help themselves.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, next is Rod Glover.
Rod Glover, 684 Stonehenge Drive. I work the pipelines, and a lot of the people when I come in, I may be in for one day, I may be in for 1 year. I never know what it does. And when I come in, one of the main things that I have to do is get my travel trailer ready to go to the next job. So that means all the slide outs will be out. It will be hooked up to electricity. It's never hooked up to water. It's never hooked up to sewer, and nobody ever lives in it. But I feel that it's wrong to be told that now I'm going to have a permit to put, or I won't even be able to work on it to get it ready for the next job. And I don't believe that it's right. We've got so many other things that need to be looked at. Yeah, there are a bunch of campers in here that just need to be gone. How we go about cleaning them up, I truthfully have no idea. But I think that we're looking in the wrong places of where to start bringing this community up to where it needs to be when you're starting to hurt the residents. And that's all I can say on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Rod. Susan, is it Hippler?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Suzanne Hippler. I think my address is 340 Ivanhoe Drive West, I believe. I'm one of these people that has an hours away. So I come down, I drive, I get the rules. You leave it there 17 days, you take it off 17 days. Or how many other
5,
days?
yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I understand. I tried to abide by it. One time we didn't. We had COVID, couldn't make it down. Apologize. I understand the rules and regulations. But when they go for me, they go in 3 or 4 feet of my fence. I can't even go to my picnic table, fart, tell a secret, call my father, call my sister, whatever it may be, without the people next to me hearing everything that I've got going on. Is it right or wrong? I don't know the rules, all the rules of it. But they're living in a motor home 17 days. They've been told. My yard is not junked up. It's barely growed up. If it goes for me, I follow the rules. Everyone else should. I've paid close to $400 in permits for mopeds, golf carts, our vehicles, our boat, not boats because we don't have to have one for the boat.
Sorry,
Everything.
I'm sorry, time. I
Okay.
hate to do
Anyway,
that.
there you go.
And the last one is it Carol?
It's Carol Goldman, but she's not going to be up. I made her sign up, thought it was a sign.
Chicken.
Because David Resnick
Okay. Well, it is absolutely wonderful seeing so many people here. And I just want everybody to know, let's not do that here in Ivanhoe. I don't think anybody has any bad intentions. It's like she was saying, if there's rules, there has to be rules for everybody. We're not trying to, I don't think anybody is trying to hurt anybody. People have admitted we have a lot of junk here to clean up. Well, can you just go to the junk ones and say, okay, you have to remove this, and everybody has to kind of cooperate. Let's not get angry with each other. Let's respect each other. Yes, Herrington has agreed to facilitate the process where we can really look at all the different angles, and it's good to hear from people because then we get your opinion. How is it going to affect me? How do I see it? So that's important. And I'm going to turn this over to David Herrington so that he can facilitate the rest of the conversation.
First, I would like to thank Councilman Herrington for stepping up and taking charge of this. It was a hard-fought effort.
Herrington, 182 Shallon Circle, lifelong resident, born and raised here, blessed to live in the home I was born into. I will likely swing all the way from one side of the conversation all the way to the other while I'm facilitating things. Sometimes you will probably be growling at me, and sometimes you will probably want to give me a hug. But that's because this issue it's one of the least black and white issues that we have. I will say this, as I say almost every time that I speak, to privilege to serve this community and try and assist in conversations that carry us forward together, because that's how we make it. With that being said, Council, each of you have a little blank sheet. It's for taking notes. Apology to the folks out in the audience. I really wanted to be able to talk through this in a structured way. Down the left-hand column, you're going to see 5 different listings. These are, I add one to the bottom. I see them as temporary camping in an RV, on-site dwelling for construction purposes, storage of an RV on a developed lot, storage of an RV on an undeveloped lot, and I think actually the 5th block probably needs to be filled in with habitation, these different buckets or these different situations, in my mind anyways, and if at any time anybody sees anything differently or would like to augment the flow of the discussion, please let me know. I'm doing my best. But really, the concerns in my mind are going to fall into one of 2 buckets, either a health and safety concern or a nuisance concern. As far as the ordinances go. And then on the right, there's some columns there where you can jot down notes for solutions and then pros and cons to those solutions. I have no in the dialogue and clarify and align enough on the information that we have to be able to go back to the P&Z with some suggestions or requests to structure the proposed ordinance in a way that best meets the needs of the community. And that really is what we're here in the discussion for, is to identify what the needs of the community are and how best to service those. For everybody on council and everywhere, Ivanhoe has, from its inception, has always been and continues to be a deed-restricted, zoned community. And what that means in the simplest terms is that ownership of property within Ivanhoe has attached to it guidelines and regulations that property owners are required by law to follow. So that's a voluntary situation. Owning property here is voluntary. The struggle is to look at the last 60, 70 years of regulation and ordinance and sort all of that out and find out where we are today and craft a document and an ordinance that services and meets the needs of our residents. No easy task. But I just wanted to open up with that statement that we need to out. We can talk about putting things in, but what's there today is there today, and we don't have much choice about what to do with it today. That being said, I do have a small stack of ordinances that I have identified that have some interesting information that we should probably all be aware of. categorizations or situations with RVs, recreational vehicles, do these sound like they cover the bases to you? Just about everything is going to fall into one of these five categories of either temporary camping, on-site dwelling for construction purposes, one of the two storage categories, or a habitation situation?
So when you talk about storage, you're talking about storage of an RV,
Correct. So if you have,
not a storage building.
so assuming that my loose on a developed lot, storing a trailer at your homestead, so to speak, versus storing it on an undeveloped lot or a lot that does not have a permanent residence structure on it. Does anybody see another situation that's not accounted for that we're facing other than these five? Easy ones. It's going to be uphill all the way.
Yeah, I
So,
got you.
and we can amend and add to as we go. That being said, does everybody more or less loosely agree that it's either going to fall into a health and safety or a nuisance category, the challenge that we see with each of these situations? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we can always add to as we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so to begin with, temporary camping is a definitions multiple times. As Skip often says, I am going to belabor the point of clarity on the verbiage that we use because it makes a difference. If we are not clear in our intention, if we are not clear. So temporary camping is not well defined. And I'm just going to roll through a couple of these for an overview, and then we'll dive down into each subsection. On-site dwelling for construction purposes is clearly defined. However, construction in general, we'll circle back around to it, could potentially use some additional categories or classifications because in order to issue permits for, there could be some additional discussion about that. Storage on a developed lot. This is something that in my 43 years out here since I was a child, it has always been my understanding, although we can't seem to find the exact deed restriction or ordinance that states it at the moment. Full transparency. Storage of an RV has always been prohibited on a lot with a holdover from the last 60 years. The understanding has been that if you have a house, you can store an RV there. Storage on undeveloped lots. This is not anything that is called out or defined clearly within the code. It's essentially the situation that we run into with the phrase that is used, permanent camping, but still not exceptionally well defined in the code. And then habitation. Habitation is expressly prohibited. So that being said, how about we start out looking at each of these situations and identifying what our concerns are with RVs in these situations that compels us to create an ordinance to govern that situation. Because as Mr. Olmsberg, indicated, oftentimes when people hear, we do know that our city is established on a system of regulations and controls that are meant to provide a true service for the common good of the community. But we have to understand what our intention is with each of these things. So I'm going to open the floor. Does anybody have any concerns relative to health and safety or nuisances as related to temporary camping? This would be, since it's undefined, I'm going to say it as somebody that gave a 17 in, 5 out, 5 day out window. Let's just say that that's temporary camping, just for the sake of argument, even though it's not well defined. Temporary camping, 17 days or less, and then you're going to pull it out. Are there health and safety concerns or nuisance concerns associated with that situation that anybody would like to voice?
In all RVs, one thing that we have to address is you're gonna have to either have a septic system, you need a place to either go dump it, or you're gonna have Pineywood or sanitation company come out and drain your tanks. They have the big gray tanks that they can put out there,
Temporary
in
tanks.
temporary tanks, and they'll come out and empty them for you once a week. Whether you live in an RV or you have it for 17 days, they're not gonna hold for 17 days. No way. So, I think our first address is that the health and safety abide by this is right now. So we have to look at all of these.
So as I hear it, proper sewage disposal would go on every one of these situations.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Number one.
Anybody on council disagree with that?
No.
Okay.
Now then, I did ask where the nearest dump station is, and that's at Dam B.
That's a ways off.
So we have an old dump station here that's no longer functional. We may, as a city, have to pitch in and bring that.
To this, but my best guess is that will wind up getting removed as part of the reconstruction of the levee
Oh,
there
I
on Lake
understand.
Ivanhoe
Yeah, I
for
understand
environmental purposes.
I understand completely, but we
that's
may
not
need
to say-
we may need to invest in a dump station for just that purpose.
And that's a potential solution. City dump station?
Yes, sir.
That would be, because there's several, a lot of people who have RVs have a blue tote that they can take there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or pull the RV in. Mayor, so long as they dump properly. That's an issue.
Oh, they're saying they can't hear you, Will. Would you please move the mic closer?
CD turned it off.
Uh-oh. CD,
Yeah, blame CD.
it's your fault.
So having a city dump station provides an easier opportunity for actually do that.
I knew you were going to go there.
Rather, it's the burning question in the room. It's the whole reason for having ordinance. Just to be clear, ordinances are not there for good people who make good decisions with good conscience and look out for their neighbors. It's for people who don't mind bending the rules or skirting around it or doing things that are destructive to other people and their property. So the question always winds up being, even if we provide the opportunity for people to make a good and conscientious and healthy and safety decision, health being followed through with, and that we're not letting black water slide into the lake and into other people's yards and into the ditches.
So that puts us in a position of policing everybody.
Code enforcement in some way.
So
Whether it be homes, manufactured homes, it's all across the board.
That's true, but
How are you going to enforce that?
that's a completely different question. And while I respect that is an serious issues and concerns, at this exact moment in time, we're trying to eat this elephant. And with RVs, it's a bit of a different beast because you're not talking about a dwelling that falls necessarily under construction guidelines or OSSF mandates for inspections before it's hooked up to. This is a piece of private property that somebody has on their residence that we're attempting to ensure is being utilized in an environmentally safe and
Issue.
unless they have a septic system.
Unless they have a septic system, which they're going to have to come to the city and get a permit for their septic.
are you talking about on now? Is that relevant to storing on a developed lot with a house that already has a septic, or on an undeveloped lot that they're going to put a septic system in for? Because we don't actually provide for that at present.
If it's just storage and they're not living in it or using it, then then they're not going to need a septic for it. But if you're doing temporary, right now we don't have anything. I mean, you can come here and you can stay 17 days, but where's it going? It's not going anywhere. You don't see them leaving because we don't have a dump station here. And you don't see the sanitation companies coming out. And if you go back and look at the permits, they don't have a septic. So, and they let them know if you're going to be here, you're gonna have to go put a septic in, or you're going to go to the dump station, or you're gonna have the sanitation companies coming out. But first thing you have to do is get some strict guidelines on how you're going to deal with it.
Dump station, sanitation service, or actually having people haul and dispose themselves. That still leaves us with the question of how do we know? And as a council, do we want to and should we be held accountable to make sure that TCEQ guidelines are being followed within our city? Swinging to the other end, is this something that we can rely on reports from folks out in the community?
And deal with it as an exception,
No, we deal with it
on an
as
exception basis.
Well,
on a case by case basis
That's the same thing.
when reported or when discovered.
all right. At the core parks,
Mhm.
and at Sandy Creek, they have a dump station. There's no septic. Is not following the rules, then they let the Corps know about it.
Who does?
Other campers.
So
There
self-policing.
is normally,
Yeah.
normally they will not do that. If they have a means to do it, that's going to be 90% of your issue. And I've been to a lot of core parks, and there's never been an issue because they have a way to dispose of it.
Mm.
It's simple.
Groups of people when we look at these different categories and situations. The situation that you're talking about, I love RVers. I don't have an RV myself. I've been RVing. I have friends that have RVs, and it's a very close-knit group of people that go out on the road and go to the parks and go to the beach and go on vacations, and they're really junking up, their campsites. And so for temporary camping, I think, that may well be something that sort of sorts itself out. But when we've got situations like permanent habitation or abandoned RVs or people that are just doing whatever they feel like doing with it, again, the question becomes for the city, how do we create a system that forcible? I think that when the component of 154123 got dropped a couple years ago at Chuck's recommendation, anybody that was there for it can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it was about whether or not it was legally enforceable. I think it was about whether we could functionally enforce it as a city. And that's where the permitting strategy came in, because it gave a mechanism and a tool for us to be able to visually go out and say, okay, these folks have checked in. They know what the rules and guidelines are. In the city, it could be 50, it could be, 450. But the percentage of folks that actually know what the requirements are for sewage disposal, for, whether or not they're supposed to be there for an extended period of time or not, we don't know any of that. And so I think what the permitting strategy sought out to do was to give the city and the code enforcement department a mechanism by which to manage a very, very large task that, Chuck saw it in safety concerns. I don't want anybody dumping sewage in my backyard. I don't want anybody dumping sewage in my neighbor's backyard. So how we get at the mechanism that we use to get at these infringements is what we're working towards. Not super easy. So I'm going to move into a couple of different topics just so that we get a full. As looking at creating an ordinance or modifying an ordinance or deleting an ordinance, I think it's exceptionally important that as council we understand what our intent and our purpose is. And for this, I'm going to get some applause somewhere, I know. I'm going to go under Chapter 154, zoning, which is as authorized by Texas Local Government Code 211, the zoning regulations and districts as herein established have been made in accordance with an adopted comprehensive plan for the purpose of promoting the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, and protecting and preserving places and areas of historical, cultural, and architectural importance and significance within the city. They have been designed to lessen the congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers, to ensure adequate light and air, to prevent the overcrowding of land and the schools, parks, and other requirements. They have been made with reasonable consideration, among other things, for the character of each zoning district, its particular suitability for the uses specified, and with a view to conserving the value of buildings and attributes, and to encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout the city. I know that was a big lump of words to take a big block of time, but that's at the front end of Chapter 154 on zoning. It's a purpose and it's an intent, and I read that trying to achieve and why we're doing it. And so health and safety, wastewater treatment kicks out there, value of buildings and attributes. These are high points that in my mind should be guiding stars or compass points that we aim towards. I won't belabor that any further. Interesting note, in section 154, and this is for council specifically so that we can educate ourselves on moving forward to 154.116. Districts by original section name. Districts 1, 2, and 3 are listed there. And out to the far right-hand side, if you don't have, I apologize for not bringing copies of everything, but District 1, single-family residential, mobile homes allowed, limited camping. District 2, single-family residential, no with restrictions. See section 154.124. So although at some point in time, somewhere between a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was a segment of this code dropped, we still have an indication at the very lead-in of the establishment of these zoning districts that limited camping is a part of that designation. So we've got a little bit of cleanup to do for parity's sake. I just wanted to bring the great meeting. At the end of which, the comment I think was made, we can't do this one piece at a time. We have to look at this entire chapter, this entire segment, and make sure that it's all aligned, it's all in parity, and it all points to the same purpose. And so we've got a little bit of cleanup to do in here, but this is as much as to say there's still stipulations for...
David, just for council's knowledge, the next, if you start at chapter 154.118, 1.119, and .12, it gives even more detail. The task of the council is to define limited camping.
Thank you, Brad. So note another term that I believe needs some definition. Within sections 154.117 through 124, and this is all of the details on each of the zone districts. There's a subsection on all of them detailed as open storage, and they all have the same detail in the same statement. Open storage is prohibited, and this is on
D.2.
yeah, D.2. Open storage is prohibited except for materials for the resident's personal use or consumption, such as firewood, garden material of an RV on the property or not. But it's a sliver of data that caught my attention. If we get into the meat of where the proposed ordinance 2022-4 is aimed at, we're looking at section 154.123 and 154.124. And those are camping 2.4, subsection B, item 5. No travel trailer, motorhome, or other movable structures of any kind, with the exception of manufactured homes, which will follow the permit process established in Ordinance 2011-027A, shall be erected, placed, or maintained on any lot nor brought into the subdivision until a city sticker of approval has been applied for and approved by the. At no time shall a travel trailer, a travel trailer or motorhome be occupied as a full-time residence, or shall more than one travel trailer, motorhome, or other movable structure be placed on a lot. So this is already in the code. This isn't anything new. This isn't proposed. This has been here for a very long time. So one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves with all this is, knowing RV, it's a black and white compliance issue that we have people that are in RVs. And we have to decide as a city what we do or do not do about that.
Did you realize that you can homestead an RV?
I don't know how you can do that if it's not in compliance with
You
the
can
zoning
homestead an
ordinances.
RV.
You can homestead one.
If it's not in compliance with zoning ordinance, I mean, I don't know. I'm not in compliance with its municipality or governing
Well,
agency.
That's not the state's concern.
It's not their, yeah. But I think, when you look at the habitation of an RV,
Mhm.
you have to look at for hardship cases. And there's certain circumstances that's all they can afford. And I know of 2 in the city right now where it's a hardship case. And you have an 85-year-old gentleman whose house burnt down, you're going to tell him, you can't live here anymore?
That
Where is he-
situation is that situation is dealt with under variances, and it provides for undue hardship. If for that reason you just delete the provision, then it opens it up to people without an undue hardship. So that's the consideration that you have to go through. But your situation that you're highlighting, Councilman Warren, is already addressed in the variance section.
And you said that we had to go by the letter of the law that we couldn't give variances.
That's
There's
my reading of the section that calls out and details the zoning board of adjustments, which we are. Is that our correct title? That runs in parallel with the P&Z, is that we have the opportunity and the authority to review a code enforcement call and make a different decision if we feel it necessary and appropriate.
So
Now,
would that individual have to pay their $250?
is that
I'm not sure what the fee is.
Sir?
I said I'm not sure what the fee is, but council could definitely consider an affidavit of indigency to waive fees.
so? We've got some potential pathways for that. Whether or not, that's a council call. We already have that authority. Now, setting up the structured system for how somebody applies for that, that's something new that we would need to create and streamline to make sure. Conditional use permits and variances have been a real thorn in my side for a while, because people often show up with a variance request that's, I want to break the rules just because. Well, that you didn't read what a variance request really is. It's for undue hardship or some situation that really necessitates it. But just because you don't want to spend the money, or because you don't like the way it's going to look, I do recommend that if we go down that road, we do so with great care, because every time that you grant a variance, you're setting a precedent. And people like parity, and I don't blame them. Things should be fair and equitable. So, under the habitation, okay, let's bump back briefly because I know what to talk about on-site dwelling, which is the term that's used for living in an RV. It's used most that I have seen in relationship to living in an RV. To get in the proposed ordinance, to get that permit for on-site dwelling, you have to have the construction permit. But there are types of construction that do not require a permit from the city presently that could vary. And the outside looks great, but you want to redo the entire inside? Well, you can't gut a house on the inside down to studs and take out the toilets and sinks and have it be habitable. So while it doesn't require a permit at all, so long as you're not changing the footprint, that house is no longer.
The inside of the house have been gutted or not, and what business would it have been of anybody's?
Well, if you want to live in your RV and the city requires a construction permit to do so because habitation of an RV is not permanent habitation of an RV. Full.
So if you have a house
Uh-huh.
and it's under construction, you may work in there, you may live in there,
Mhm.
but you want to go sleep in the RV. It's none of anybody's business what is done at that time.
If you're under construction?
Or not under construction.
Or at any time.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Well, and that's where, again, even my son comes in from, Washington and stays in my RV for 3 weeks. Is that full-time habitation? No. If he stays in it for a month, is it full-time? No. He's not redirecting his mail. He doesn't have any plans to stay there. He's on extended leave from the Air Force.
Summertime.
Whatever,
It's nobody's business.
I think that that's something that we need to define. If
problem-
you get mail there, and that's the only livable structure there, that's full-time habitation in my mind.
This is not advocating for any particular outcome, but the problem is that you have deed restrictions that say that it's for temporary camping, not permanent camping. So this is not even something the city deed restrictions and do a wholesale change of your code to eliminate temporary camping. So that's why the council is now tasked with defining what temporary camping means.
So
So you'd have to go through the deed restriction amendment process. The actual
We've been
subdivision.
kind of bouncing
Time.
around.
The
so-
subdivision would have to do that, and that's not a
Oh.
city. That's not.
which carries our deed restrictions, correct?
Yes.
If the association has a deed restriction that is tighter, so to speak, or more restrictive than ours, the property owners are required to abide by the more restrictive of the two.
Way can, really be as restrictive as they want.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Move it close to you, Brad.
It says low battery, I think.
Okay, you can have mine. I'm not.
So then, Brad, would it not make sense for us to make a review of the deed restrictions and ensure that we are not attempting to
Bought a home under certain thinking, okay, this is what I'm contracting for, a home that has deed restrictions, and then there's a wholesale change without going through the deed restriction amendment process. The person who bought a single-family home in a single-family home district, and if the city undoes temporary camping and suddenly there's somebody living next to them permanently, they're like, this isn't what I bargained for. So that's the issue that the city has to be aware of, is that there's temporary camping. So you've got to define temporary camping. That's just the legal nature of what we're dealing with here.
So how do you, are the deed restrictions enforceable, and who enforces them?
Any person who lives, any person who lives in that subdivision could enforce it. It takes a 2/3 vote to amend deed restrictions in Texas.
I just recently read part of the original deed restrictions. There-
And yeah, a lot of, former deed restrictions have been held unconstitutional, but these type of deed restrictions, still are.
Okay, so now that that's thoroughly murky in the waters,
Clear as mud.
yeah, it's like looking through tar.
Maybe David, we should pick one and stick.
Prairie camping. Now this assumes this to me is is the least challenging of all situations, because this is somebody that's coming in and going out. They're bringing their RV in and they're going out. If you're really temporary camping. And other than tracking sewage disposal, does anybody have any challenges or concerns about temporary camping?
You have to just set out there.
Yeah.
Forward chair.
I would hazard to guess that it's the 17:5 ratio that we've historically used. That being said, that doesn't have to be the number, and it.
Okay. Why 17.5?
You know, I have no idea why that number was originally chosen. I know that there has been some variation of that. No, I'm not going to go down that road.
You can go 14 days and 1 day, 14 and 2 days.
Okay, I will go there. This city was developed and built by Charles Ross in Development.
Mm-hmm.
He is a land and was a land developer. I doubt that he did it just out of the goodness of his heart. He's a businessman. I think, this is my personal opinion, that 17:5 rule years and watching it rot into the ground, which would deter people from wanting any property near that one. Now, that plays into, both the quiet enjoyment of property owners that are out here, but it also plays into his ability to market and sell more lots. Secondly, I believe that 17:5 was meant to discourage people from, again, bringing in an RV or a camper, setting it up on the lot, and leaving it there for 15 or 20 years in properties that all, at the time we weren't a city, so we weren't collecting taxes, but at that point in time, he was still selling lots. And, a lot next to a $100,000 house is worth more than a lot, next to a $15,000 RV. That's just the mechanics of the market. Do I think that that's something that we need to be conscientious about in our decision? I don't think that I personally don't believe that needs to be a driving force, but I do believe that we need to be conscientious and aware of the remaining lots out here, because every time a house gets built out here, everybody's tax rate drops a little bit more. And so that's real critical for our future.
So how are you going to enforce that? Say we have arbitrary number, 17.5. How are we going to enforce that? That's going to be your next rabbit hole you're going to have to go down, because
Was developed was specifically to be able to have a visual aid and reference that's posted on the trailer that is maybe color coded with large print. That way you could drive by, you see an orange tag, you know that this is a temporary camper. There's the big lettering. They are way past their 10 days or 17 days or whatever. It's time for them to come in and renew, make sure that they're taking care of their sewage, etc. Just for everybody's awareness.
When we got down to enforcing those, which I'm the last line of the enforcement. Once there's a code violation. I'm sorry. Once I'm the last line of enforcement. Once it's already been filed, a code enforcement violation notice has already been sent. The last line is that it goes to court. For me, it's almost impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt how long something has been, and I didn't see it move out. How am I supposed to prove that? So it became almost an impossible task to prove those, and code enforcement didn't know how to do it either. Code enforcement, maybe the neighbor calls us to say this thing's been here for 3 weeks now. How do they really prove that? It became the problem.
Permitting strategy as a viable utility to be able to monitor and enforce ordinance effectively, and if so, what makes it a viable or functional tool?
Yeah, I think just from the enforcement standpoint, again, the policy standpoint is y'all's purview. That's not me. It's a certain color, and when they come in and they get their permit, CD or whomever in the office writes a date on it, that and there's a record of it at City Hall where it was written. If we're then past the 17 days on that, that's a pretty strong. I have a pretty strong ability to enforce that. Was there a second part to that question?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
All right, so we were on the topic of on-site dwelling for construction purposes. Am I hearing Skip for a construction period?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're building a house and you have an RV there, you can stay in that while you're building. I mean, that seems fair and reasonable. Should there be a limit to the time? I'm not sure. I mean, with the way construction goes, it's the amount of time it's going to take to build a house is
It's
hard to
variable.
it's hard to pin down. It's variable.
On-site dwelling for construction?
Yes.
It's currently permitted for 6 months. The council may want to consider, an extension of that time, if it's not going to be completed in 6 months, potentially.
That's fair and reasonable also. But the 6 months, it doesn't need to be a firm fixed time. Oh, you didn't get your house finished, now you got to move it out.
I'm going to really play devil's advocate on this one, Skip.
Please do.
Construction. But you or I or Will or anybody in the audience can walk up and say, that house ain't ever getting finished. Ever. It should not be finished.
You can play what if all day long.
Well, I say what if, but I say it with properties in mind that I know exist right now. I know that there are people that may have been building for years that there's not even an intention of finishing.
They have to have inspections.
Yeah,
This-
there is a building inspector.
Yes, but this
That's a whole different topic.
well, it's on-site dwelling for construction, but this is all under the assumption that there's no permit required for that, because that's the solution that's been posed. And maybe we don't evaluate solutions tonight. Maybe we just write down solutions and come back to that later.
I think
Because like I
that's-
said, it's a lot.
There's paired with your building inspections,
Right.
and there's a timeline in there.
Did you ask a question?
I just saw you say
Yeah,
something.
I just mentioned that people can come in and renew their building permit. 6 months in today's market, especially materials, sometimes you can't get them. And so, no, we don't, if somebody comes in and wants a renewal on their building permit, that's not a problem.
Which that's fine with, area where you're building a house and RVs are not necessarily permitted, but you want to live in it while you're building, then you could get a permit. As long as you can have it extended.
Another just point of clarification. These can be no-cost permits, and some people, and there doesn't have to be a cost. We can decide if there's a cost, but it's just to be able, for enforcement purposes, to be able to identify the ones that are here, and permitted. It's really not a lot of difference, from the permits that we give people for their golf carts every year from the association.
That's totally different.
That's private.
Well,
That's
it's
different.
private.
We're
It's
public.
private, but it shows that there's something that's, anyway, it doesn't matter.
So I'm going to try to have a couple other items on the agenda. Storage on a developed lot, and this is a term that's not found anywhere in the code, but I have recommended to the P&Z that we call out definitions for storage and for developed and undeveloped lots. Because
So what is a developed lot and what is an undeveloped lot? Is it a house and not a house?
I would say without question that a lot with a house on it is developed. Does that constitute developed? Well, there's been some development, but we don't state that anywhere. And so to me, our community has always looked at storage of an RV on a lot with a home differently from on a lot without a home. It's always been that way. And if we're going to do something different from that, or if we're going to continue to do that, we need to define those terms. It makes good sense to me. Or not we permit or anything like that, but does anybody have any issues or concerns with allowing residents to store an RV on their property with which they have a full-time residence, a fully developed lot?
No. There is a situation where they have a house down the street, they have a lot that's on the lake, and it has a building. When they come up, they stay there. They have a portable blue tank, they haul it up to their house and dump it there. You know who it is, and.
No, and I think that, there's has to be some way that we can allow for those
Circumstances.
circumstances, yeah, because that makes sense.
Well,
But,
we're going to have to evaluate,
again-
again, that's storage on a seemingly undeveloped lot. And so
There
this
is a building there.
building?
It's a large metal building. It's a storage building.
I got you. In any case, that's a different question. So I believe that there's a need to define developed and undeveloped lots and then make the clear decision as council. Do we want to continue what has been a historical tradition of restricting the 365-day-a-year storage of an RV or camper? Well, because if the deed restrictions don't allow for it, we can't allow it, can we?
No, we cannot basically be a go-behind behind the deed restrictions of a way of getting out of deed restrictions.
What if they've expired?
Say again? Say again?
Private comment.
I think with your question, though, it really starts to muddy this scenario starts muddying the water with temporary camping, though. Then I think the line becomes, because they're having a different permit or whatever, then I think it makes the overall enforcement scheme tougher.
I agree. At this point, I'm going to recommend. I don't know how much more we can achieve in this conversation to the existing deed restrictions, because it will be an absolute waste of time for us to put a code into effect that is not in parity legally with the deed restrictions that are already in place. Does anybody see any issue with taking that route of aligning with the P&Z, communicating with the association on the deed restrictions, getting some better definitions for some of these terms that are called out? How much more we can get done this evening?
I agree with that.
I agree with you.
But-
I think that we all have concerns. I do want to say one more thing. Brad, did you make any headway on that question that I had for you earlier?
The non-conforming use question?
Yes.
Hadn't been able to go back and look at that. Let me look into that a little further, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Make a note of that and present it to the community to see if they would be interested in a reasonable change.
On the deed restriction side?
Yes.
Well, if our conversations say that we feel that the city should go in one direction, and that's what we would vote on, then it makes good sense to engage the association and say,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Would you take it before your members?
To decide, we don't care, permanent camping everywhere. But if that runs afoul of the deed restrictions, you have to look at both.
Yeah,
In the
that's why I'm saying, if
and
we
that's
see
what our-
something that's out of whack.
And that's what our ordinances have tried to assist in, is mirroring the deed restrictions.
Right, and one of the problems we have are there's 28 different sections, and each one of them have their own deed restrictions. So it's confusing, it's complicated.
It's I spent my entire Labor Day laboring on this. exclusively.
I've lost sleep over
And,
it.
well, and
Yeah.
I'd like to commend our P&Z. They have spent days on this. I've sat in on some of the meetings, and they have worked and worked and worked. And thank you guys. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
I commend the time and effort that's been put into it, because it's been well thought out. There's so many variations.
Be fair for everybody
Right.
across
Right.
the board. You can't pick and choose or say,
Right.
I'm in favor of this if you do this. And no, it's got to be across the board.
Exactly.
You're never going to hit 100% enforcement. I mean, everybody knows there's, laws against speeding. Doesn't stop everybody from speeding, but it slows a lot of people down. Not everybody who speeds gets caught, but the threat of it slows people down. This is against codes, and, it's just got to find the best way to make it function.
Right.
I rest.
Thank you, David.
With the exception of making one more statement to the audience, where I was going with that statement was, we're not doing this for us. All of this effort from the P&Z and from council, this is because we care about the needs and wants of our residents as possible. We thank you for your patience. We're not rushing this. We are more concerned with doing it well than doing it quickly. It is going to take some time, because this is, and I've been talking with the mayor and other councilmen for years now, that this is the biggest ball of spaghetti, one of the biggest balls of just messy, nasty stuff to figure out. How do we look at RVs in our community? Because thanks to everybody for attending and for everybody who put in input on this. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions or concerns.
Thank you, David. All right, moving right along. It's always fun, right? Okay, item number 2 is presentation of amended proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. I just want to let council know this is not something we're going to get into deep discussion about budget, because we received this. You got it in front of you. Lynette Cruz called us the other day. She's our tax assessor collector, and there was a glitch in the program, and when she sent out the figures before, they were not correct. So she sent out corrected figures. And it's like, oh my heavens, we've already gone over line item by line item this budget. Now what I have done, and this also was before we were aware about the county, what they were going to do, or what 5. That's where the proposal I had passed out and that we went over. Okay. And then the corrected one is 0.6196. You've got that in front of you. And then I did include the column, which is the no new revenue rate of 0.5848. And I just want council to understand and make sure that council understands what I passed out or what I sent out. Anybody have any questions about that? Those are the 3 different options that are on the table. And the only thing I adjust, the one figure the figure that Lynette came out with, the new figure, added an extra $12,000 to the budget, so I added that to the road material. The other one, the no new revenue rate, took off quite a bit. David is not smiling on that one. So, that's where I adjusted, because I couldn't go through and redo the whole budget at that point. So,
Mayor-
we'll have the public hearing on the budget, and I sent out these copies to everybody so you can look at where by such and such a date. That was done. The cover sheet was sent. So that's the proposed budget.
Right.
Now,
The tax-
what I did was I gave the other options. The tax rate and the budget will be approved or adopted September 28th, or is it 28th or 29th? 28th. And so at that meeting, that's when it will be adopted. In the meantime,
The M&O of 0.6196.
I put it there. That's the new figure she gave us. And so
And-
I put it in there.
And with the INS, that of 0.1433.
Well, okay, I just left the INS at 0.150 because both the rates that she gave us would not bring in the amount of money we need to pay the the note. So that's kind of scary because we have, and the other thing is what actually we collect. So it's an 89% collection rate. Any other questions, council, about this? So make sure that you're aware that we will have that public hearing prior to the meeting on the 15th. All right. Moving right along, consider for discussion action amendment to employee hand. We will do that right now. It is 7:04 p.m. and it should be short.
mess.
I'm gonna get me another lot so I can get me an RV and park on it. Well, maybe.
You know, there was some, a question asked about, you know, a storage lot of some kind. I don't know if we'd ever be able to do
When we
that.
first bought out here back in 2 months and not move it.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said anything to us. When we left, we moved it.
Where was that? Is
You
that
know
where the
where Bill
sand?
Weed's house is, or used to be?
Yeah,
That's where it was. It was back there.
You mean his laydown yard or?
he's on the lake.
7:33 p.m. There is no action necessary taken on any of the items we talked about in closed sessions. So, are there any council comments before we entertain a motion to adjourn?
David, I would just like to say thank you for taking this and running with it. You're bringing a lot of good points to this and helping us establish exactly what it is that we're trying to do. Brad, I want to thank you for your input also, even though I don't agree with you half the time.
Opposed?
I'd say
Okay,
something.
we are
Yeah, I can-
adjourned. Huh? It's 7:34.
You know, Skip, I'm used to that. Half the people automatically disagree with me. I walk into a courtroom, half of them hate me already.